Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
For centuries, ancient cultures knew the secrets to longevity, vitality, and healing. Now, modern science is catching up. Ageless Blueprint is a podcast that will reveal the modern secrets of better health and a better life. Join Dr. Eldred Taylor here today and every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time on W4HC Radio at W4HC.com. As together we discover the secrets to better health through science and spirituality. A Better Life with Ageless Blueprint starts now. Here's your host, Dr. Eldred Taylor.
Hello, good morning. I am Dr. Taylor, the hormone doctor and the spiritual MD. And this is Wednesday, so it's time for the Ageless Blueprint. Now, I'm in a little different setup. What I figured out, I'm in my home. I want to kind of connect and not necessarily be the doctor or the authority figure, and just kind of, we have some discussions because I want to be a communicator. I don't want to be an educator. Educators can make a lot of things very difficult and hard to understand. So I like to take things that seem to be complex and confusing and try to break them down and communicate them so where anybody can understand it. So that's why I'm in my study. We're going to do a little history lesson today. We're talking about how hormone confusion is not a modern thing. It has been around since the beginning of time. There's all of these archaeological digs, and they're finding things out about these ancient civilizations and what they thought and all that. And so it's really interesting how hormone confusion is not something that I just started. This has always been confusion, and primarily it's because men have been trying to understand women and to try and write it down and make sense of it. And that's where the problem is that men trying to understand women. And I think that has made it where women have had a hard time trying to understand themselves. So that's what we want to talk about today. So let's get started. All right, let's go to that first slide. All right, can you make that? All right, so I'm gonna put my glasses on, make sure I can see this. So hormone confusion, it is ancient, and I believe it's time to end it. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is to end hormone confusion. All right, so this is what I say. You see a man trying to write it down and understand it and anatomy, and has kind of been the issue, is that men trying to understand women. And I always say, hey, look, I'm a man, I'm an OBGYN, and I know you might say, oh, what does he know? But I tell you, I've spent a lot of time trying to understand how the female body works so that I could help women do better, okay, feel better and not feel like themselves again. So what we want to do now is try and end that confusion, all right? So yeah, now history didn't begin with Rome and Aristotle. One of the most exciting things I've ever done is go to Egypt, and you will see that, before the Greeks and the Romans, women were passing down knowledge, or whoever the hieroglyphics, they had a lot of symbols about women and their flow. And you can see, it's like water is their flow and pregnancy. And back in Egypt, they really seemed to honor women because they saw them as being able to create life. Okay, and so the Egyptian civilization was built on that. The ground was giving them life, and so they worshiped. Well, I won't say they worshiped, but they honored anything that gave life. So that was their understanding of women. And see, even back then, the symptoms were real. All right, they still had menstrual cycles. They still probably had pain. There was still issues with infertility. If you weren't able to bear children, you were sometimes looked at as being deficient. You had pregnancies. I'm sure there was mood changes. That's why they thought some women were possessed during that time, and women were burned at the stake thinking they were witches or whatever. There's energy changes and life transitions. they went through puberty and like all of a sudden what's going on, and then how do we get pregnant? What's going on? How do we maintain a pregnancy? So they had to try and figure all of that stuff out. We think it was like, oh, everybody always knew that. No, that's not the case. All right. And then every era has an absolute truth. Okay, back then, all they could do was observe. They observed the stars and how the moon, arranged itself. And so what happens is they would observe something, they would match it with the menstrual cycle or whatever, and then they would have an explanation, and they would, say that this is how it is, and then that would be accepted as truth, and then they would have to try to correct it after they found out more information. That's what we keep doing. And we've been doing that for over 10,000 years. We, we come up with some observation. We like to have cause and effect. Okay, so this happened. That was the cause. This is the effect. And so that's all you had when you didn't have real science. All right. So there are some ancient theories of the female body. And I can't see the top of this, but back in, I think this is Aristotle, is that they thought male equal form. Okay, great. Thank you. Aristotle. All right. So male equal form or active principle, female equal matter. But so they had their thoughts, and this is how, especially in ancient Egypt, they thought about female and male energies and whatever. And so women were believed to be colder. And so menstrual blood was interpreted inside that model, that they were losing heat. So they weren't as active as males. And so they were kind of looked down upon, not like the Egyptians who thought that being able to create was something sacred. They thought it was something that that the body was correcting itself and also making them less active as men. So that's the beginning of kind of the subjugating women, okay, based on the fact that they have menstrual cycles. All right. So, and then in the humor, this is more of what you would think about Asia when you talk about Chinese medicine. They talk about excesses and balances and heat and all of this. And so that was another thought process. All right. So that in some cultures, that was what everybody believed, and that's what they thought. And so they based their treatment of women on what they believed. Now, in some societies, they thought that excess blood caused illness and that menstruation was looked like the body restoring balance. So, and if you didn't have a cycle, they felt like you were out of balance. And some of that has continued. Women think and I see this all the time, if they don't have a cycle, they think something's out of balance. They think something needs to be released. And so that can be a part of it, but that's not all of the framework. And that's what I'm saying. We would take small parts and then we would look at, we would make that and then we would expand it. And so we need to not just look at one thing and think there's a cause and effect with everything. All right. So before there were controlled experiments, and I also want to say, hey, look, if you have questions, put them in the chat. There's two things I want to do is if you had questions from last week, I want you, we're going to go over those. But I want you to, if you have questions, just put them in there and we will answer those at the end. Now, before there were controlled experiments, all you observed things. You're like, okay, this happened and what caused it? And then a lot of it was just coincidence. And then you would make a story, and then that story would be repeated and it would go down from generation to generation. And then all of a sudden it's accepted as being truth. Okay, so when you don't have good evidence, you just make up stories. And our brain is good at making up stories and trying to look at patterns and trying to look at cause and effect. And again, when you don't have good data, you will make up stories that fit whatever your environment is. All right. So because of that, you get all of these different thoughts about menstruation. Okay. Some people thought it was dangerous. Okay. And I think sometimes it's because the mood changes and the women may have gotten upset or whatever. So they thought it was dangerous. Some people thought it was impure. And they thought that, hey, if you got exposed to menstrual blood, that it could kill crops and it could bring bad luck and all of these things. So it's all how you observe things. And if something coincidental happened around the menstrual cycle, then they would say, okay, well, then that's what menstrual cycles are. And then some thought it was sacred, like the Egyptians, and then some thought it was powerful, that they had all of these they had all of this extra sensation. They could feel things and predict things, and that's why men have been so intrigued by women and can't understand them, because they have intuition. They can sense things. They would talk about how the plants would tell them what is safe and what is not safe and what would work to help their menstrual cramps and all this. And women were more connected to nature and how they felt. And so this was one of the reasons why I think men tried to uh, put women to the side or make them lesser than, because they saw that they had wisdom and intuition that it was very hard for them to connect to. And for women, it was just natural. All right. And see, this is another thing. Education was once said to damage a woman's fertility. So that's a assumption that just doesn't make sense. And that's another way you can say, okay, this damages her fertility. And believe me, the number one thing in ancient times was being able to reproduce, to be able to uh, carry the species on. So if it was important, because it was so important to be fertile, then they were like, oh, education, these women are too smart, it's damaging their fertility. And I won't say, but some of that may be true when I'm talking about high performing women. Okay. High performing women, they have difficulty ovulating. And so that may have been a cause and effect, that these smarter women, or these women with more education, they don't seem to be able to get pregnant as much. And that can be true, but we just need to understand the whole framework around it. All right. All right. So how can old ideas survive? Well, here's how it happens. Okay. You have some thought process and some authority. Some man writes down, or some whatever. They write it down in an authority figure. And in our times, the authority figures are, uh, the universities and all of these boards and all of the opinion makers. So an authority says something. And a lot of times it's based on tradition or incomplete frameworks. And if you have limited technology to explain it, or to discover what is actually going on, and you don't have proper endocrinology, and even today we don't have proper endocrinology, you don't have any trials, and you don't have a better explanation, so the authority and the tradition rules. Okay, so that's how that happens. Now, this is the woman's side of the story. I talk about men tried to describe it and women lived it. Okay. So in ancient times, they would isolate women. Okay. Some would isolate them as because they thought they were dangerous, and the other isolated them because they wanted them to rest and have some privacy. And what happened is that these women would get together and they would menstruate together, and they would tell stories, and they would talk to each other, and they would get through it. They would figure out, how did one person handle their menstrual cycle, because remember, back then there was no protective pads and tampons and anything. And so they would have their menstrual cycle. They would figure out how to correct it, how to, figure out how to get rid of the pain. That's what they would do. All right. So that's how women got through it. Men were trying to understand it, and women just survived it, and they lived it, and they found remedies, and they found some solace, because they were together. It was a community. They were all experiencing something together. And we are so society and connected, is that helped them get through it. All right. Now, they may not have known endocrinology, but they knew that isolation was harder than connection. That if you do this by yourself, it's much harder than if you do it with other women. And women need other women. Okay, it's just it. Women like to talk woman talk, okay? Because women share their feelings. Men try to understand women, okay? And they try to provide a solution, and women feel each other's emotions, and they share their sorrows, and they share their insecurities. And men don't do that. And women, because they're comfortable with their emotions, they seem to get along better. Okay, so let's go. And see, I used to wonder why everybody was going to these Facebook groups, but now I understand. Okay, this is the new communal hut. I'm telling you, there's so many Facebook groups on there with women talking to women about their test results, their symptoms. What are you doing? What is this doing? Now I understand. I was like, why are all these people going to Facebook groups? They're going there because evolution wise, that's how you dealt with your menstrual cycle, is you talk to other women. And so now I understand that. And that's why I'm trying to recruit women to understand this, so that when they're having their communal meetings, whether it's on Facebook or whether it's in a woman's group or whatever, is that they're the ones who are the authority, and they're the ones who are giving good information. So now this information gets passed on like it should, like it really is, okay, and not based on observation and cause and effect, but just based on what is. All right. Hey, Roz, does that make sense to you? Now I understand. I used to talk about, why are all these women on Facebook? Why are all these women on Instagram? Why are they on YouTube trying to figure this out? That's how women are. That's how they're designed. Does that make sense to you, Roz?
It definitely does. Definitely makes a little bit of sense there.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, when they twist it all together, the man's thinking and the woman's thinking, somehow or another, we still got handed down, this is supposed to. These supposed tos got put in people's heads. And there is no supposed to in this situation. Is that correct?
Well, when you say supposed to, how is a menstrual cycle supposed to happen? There is a
No.
pattern. Oh, what do you mean? What do you mean?
The things that people tell each other, like, oh, well, when you hit this age, this is gonna happen. And there's no guarantee that everybody's gonna go through any of this the same.
Exactly. And this is why I'm saying, when you understand the basics, you'll understand why one person can go through their menstrual cycles and all of this and be totally fine, and another person will have all kinds of problems. And remember, my number one cause and effect is stress. Okay, so if you're just going through this and there's no other stressors, usually you can get through this just fine. But most of the time, there's other stressors. It's not just your menstrual cycle. And see, back then, they didn't have all of what they did. Was they tried to survive, and they tried to help their children survive, and that was it. Okay, so back then there was not a lot of other stressors. You were just dealing with your menstrual cycle. And then the other thing that would happen when they were off in these huts, they were all, that was like, in some cultures, that was kind of a vacation, because they didn't have to deal with children. A lot of times grandma or other people in the community was taking care of their children while they were off at the menstrual huts, and they could rest, and they could have a little bit of rest and relaxation. And it wasn't looked upon as something to dread, but it was almost looked upon as something to look forward to, because it was a break from all your other problems. So anyway, so let's keep going. Now, here's the other thing that's really, really important. So back then, you didn't have a menstrual cycle every month. Okay, so just think, when you're pregnant, you don't have a menstrual cycle. And back then, everybody was breastfeeding, and sometimes they were breastfeeding for 2-3 years. All of that time, you're not having a menstrual cycle. So you didn't have to worry about cramps. You didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. All right. So those people would have a menstrual cycle maybe 2 or 3 times every 3 to 4 years. They weren't having a menstrual cycle every month. Okay. So, and in that case, when you're not having a menstrual cycle, you don't have to worry as much about balancing estrogen and progesterone and too much estrogen or whatever. You just didn't have that many menstrual cycles to worry about. okay, because you were either pregnant. Now, I will tell you, in my aunts and uncles, they were all about 2 years apart. And when you look at your aunts and uncles, they were all about 2 years apart. Why was that? Well, one, they got pregnant. They were pregnant for 9 months. Then they breastfed until they were 2 years old. And then once they stopped breastfeeding, they might get pregnant again because there wasn't any birth control. So you have to think this is a recent problem because there are a lot of women who just don't want to be pregnant. And most people have one or two babies. When I had eight aunts and 8 aunts and uncles total, so people had a lot more children, and you'll hear that especially in rural areas, people would have 12, 13 children. Well, you just think they probably in their whole lifetime they may have had 30 menstrual cycles. Okay, and you have 30 menstrual cycles, what, in 2 or 3 years? Okay, and so each time that cycle needs to be balanced. And just think, what's the likelihood of 300 menstrual cycles being balanced where you don't get too much estrogen or progesterone, or if you just have 10 menstrual cycles that you got to worry about? And so that's why I think you have all these issues with endometriosis and all of this, because women are having so many menstrual cycles. So Roz, I keep calling you Roz Rebel. Does that make sense? That's one of the things I've been saying for a long time, is that these people had all these children. You didn't hear about breast cancers and endometriosis and all that. And that may be one reason why your grandmother and mother can't tell you about your menstrual cycle and menopause, because they just didn't have that many. So what do you think about that, Rebel?
Well, let's see. I have to wonder what's more stressful, having this many children or having this many periods.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's just like, okay, I'm not having periods, so that's not stressing me out. But what about all these kids? So, but you see what I'm talking about? We've got $1 billion industry trying to help women with their menstrual cycles. You can see how that just wasn't a big deal prior to having birth control pills and all of those kind of things. So anyway,
Totally.
all right. So today the cycle is interrupted less often. Women are going into puberty earlier. That's what menarche is. So instead of starting menarche at 16 or 17, or starting the periods these girls are starting their cycles at 8, 9, 10 years old. So there's fewer pregnancies, shorter breastfeeding duration, longer reproductive lifespan, and more recurring ovulation and menstruation. So modern women may experience many more menstrual cycles across a lifetime. And again, more reoccurring ovulation and menstruation. And I've talked before about how fragile ovulation is. Okay, so every time we have to hope that conditions are right so you can ovulate, so you can make enough progesterone. All right. So no cycle is mechanically perfect. And these are all the things that I was talking about can cause a problem. You have brain signals, pituitary timing, ovarian response, ovulation, corpus luteum. Stress does not automatically break the cycle, but it can disrupt a sensitive communication system. So you think about having fewer pregnancies, more menstrual cycles, more times that stress could interrupt it, where you don't ovulate, you don't make enough progesterone, you make too much estrogen, things start to grow like fibroids and endometriosis and breast masses, right? So that's how you want to look at this, is that you do have to pay more attention to this because it's happening more often. So more cycles require better understanding. You don't want to fear your cycle. You want to understand it. You want to understand how stress and inconsistent ovulation and poor recovery and missing education can all cause these problems, and symptoms get interpreted separately. And that's the problem. I see this all the time, is that women are being sent to the endocrinologist, and then they're sent to the rheumatologist because they're saying they have joint pain, and then they get sent to the whoever, the oncologist, because they're worried about a breast mass. They get sent to the primary care doc because now they have thyroid issue, and then they go to it's all of this. And so we're separating these things out. And I see women all the time that have been going to 4 or 5 different consults or referrals, and they come back and they're still confused because all of this is connected. When you treat one symptom at a time, you're going to have a lot of confusion because treating one symptom is going to affect the other. All right. So more cycles require better understanding. So we have all these experts out here, but there's less clarity. And that's why I worry about what's on Facebook. I know you're there, but you'll see one says you got to have estrogen, the other says progesterone, the other says testosterone is for energy. And then someone says your labs are normal. And then you just get totally confused. You just don't know what to do. Now we talk about these ancient civilizations and wow, they're so uninformed and how could they think that? Well, if you talk about that, then they called it dangerous blood. We say your labs are normal, or we'll to say it's just menopause, or you need testosterone, or you need estrogen. It's just stress. We minimalize it. Okay, we try to come up with a simplistic answer. So hey, that's it, and don't worry about it. Don't try and understand it. Just go with this. All right, and you can call it this. The words have changed, but the confusion has remained. Right, so 10,000 years we've been confused. And I say, look, we can figure out how to go to the moon. We can trying to figure out how to go to Mars, figure all these things out. But we're still confused about women and their hormones. Doesn't make sense. All right. So what we want to do, we want to complete this incomplete framework. We want to narrow down the questions, incomplete measurements. We want to make those measurements more complete. We don't want to have fragmented treatment because we don't want to continue the confusion. So we want to do better. Now, we got about 4 minutes before the break. So good. So here's my premise, okay? See, I hear women all the time. They say, did your mother teach you about this? Well, one, your mother had a different experience, okay? She may have had more children. She may have not been exposed to the stress that you are exposed to. So she may have a totally different experience. And she doesn't understand exactly what's going on. She only knows her experience. And so the number one thing she wants to talk about is the hygiene, okay? Is how do you clean yourself, all this stuff, but doesn't necessarily talk about physiology because she was never taught it, all right? She knew how to get through it, but she never knew how to actually teach it and to prepare her daughter and her granddaughter for what is to come, puberty, worrying about reproduction, going through perimenopause, menopause. So menopause is treated as something to endure, and that's not how it should be. Symptoms were hidden, normalized, or dismissed. And so what happens is you do this in isolation, and that causes more stress and problems, okay? Because if you understand things, I tell patients, my number one goal is to get you to understand what's going on with you, because that's 50% of the problem, is that you don't understand it, all right? So that's what we want to do. And I say this over and over again, if you understand the menstrual cycle, I gave a lecture, said I can make you an honorary gynecologist in 4 slides in 5 minutes, because I explained the menstrual cycle, how estrogen makes tissue grow, how these cysts make estrogen. So if you have polycystic ovary, you're going to make a lot of estrogen. Things will grow, fibroids will grow, endometrial lining will grow, breast masses will grow. You got to ovulate in order to make this, so you can make progesterone, so you can slow down the growth, burn fat for energy, promote the gestation. And after 14 days, if you don't get pregnant, you have another menstrual cycle. If you do get pregnant, progesterone keeps going up and up. You stop ovulating for 9 months, you breastfeed, and that also stops ovulation. And so you don't have a cycle for 2 or 3 years. But it's all based on this. It's all based on this balance here between estrogen and progesterone. And that's what we measure with saliva testing, because now we get a complete framework of what is going on. We can do it at certain times of the cycle. We can get more than one sample. We don't have to get you to draw blood. And it tells us what is happening in the tissue, not in the blood. That's the key. All right. So if you understand the menstrual cycle, that's the original blueprint. Okay. That's what they've been trying to understand. Women have lived it. Men have been trying to understand it. It's all right here. This is the blueprint. And I can tell you when something goes wrong, what will happen. If you have too much of estrogen and not enough progesterone, things are going to grow. Okay. That is the blueprint. That's what I want people to understand. So what I've done is I've created a course, and I'm creating it. I'm putting the workbooks and everything. And this is going to be a paid course, not going to be expensive, because I want people to learn. I want this to be your textbook. The other reason why I did this is have this hormone clarity course is because women would come to me. I would get them to understand. We would do the test. Everything would be fine. And then they would go and hear something on YouTube or the internet or whatever, and they would get confused, and they would go and do something else. And then after that didn't work, they would come back to me and say, oh my God, I was looking at all this. And so I want to have something that you have in your head, that you know it is not something, is not good enough for you to listen to a YouTube. You need to know this. So I'm creating a course. Why don't I feel like myself anymore? So you can really understand cycles, ovulation, progesterone, the cortisol, sleep, stress, recovery, and the proper testing. Okay, the proper testing, how to interpret it. Is going to be a comprehensive course, because I want you to know this. I want to end hormone confusion. So this QR code here, you can take a picture of it, and you can join the waiting list. You can go to all of my links. Go to school. Just tell me when. Two things I want to know is that this is something I hope you're interested in, and I want some feedback so I can know exactly what questions that you need answered, and so we can answer them. I'm also going to put like a chat GPT in there so you can ask it some of these questions. So that's what we're building. I'm serious about ending hormone confusion. So how do we end generational hormone confusion? Women cannot teach their daughters what they never taught themselves. So if you've seen some of my previous podcasts, I'm recruiting people who can go to workplaces and churches and women's organizations, professional groups, and teach this. I'm reaching out, but I also I would love for women to be talking about this. So that's why I'm trying to get a collection of women coaches that can learn this and can go to workplaces and churches and women's organizations where they may not listen to me because I'm a man. Is that I'm creating a group of people who can go out and teach this, and woman to woman, because that's how it's more comfortable. All right. So that's what I'm trying to do. So what were you never taught? So we're going to go to break, and either Rebel, if we have some questions, let's talk about this. Okay. And let's talk about the questions that people may have, of course, if you have questions about that. That would be great. So let's go to break. I know I'm a little bit over, but I wanted to get through this. All right.
We are going to a quick break, so stay with us as we explore the ageless blueprint right here on W4HC Radio and Talk4 TV. An ancient secret with a modern twist for better health and vitality. Dr. Taylor will be right back. Taking care of your health shouldn't mean taking a handful of pills every day. At Taylor MD Formulations, they create doctor-developed supplements that combine the best natural ingredients so you get the results you need with fewer pills. Taylor MD Formulations is backed by science, designed for real life with real results. Less pills, better health, doctor approved. Shop now at TaylorMDFormulations.com and discover smarter supplements for smarter health. That's TaylorMDFormulations.com. We are back for more of Ageless Blueprint. Once again, let's join Dr. Taylor for more insights and research on the ancient secret to better health and a better life in modern times. Here's your host, Dr. Eldred Taylor.
Okay. Hey, Rebel, I see that there are some questions over here on the comments, and I see you have some other ones. Those are probably from last week. Is that correct?
Correct. Let's cover
Okay.
this week's ones first.
Okay. So, hey, can you put it up? Okay. How does stress affect hormone balance? Oh, I hope you can please sign up for my YouTube or subscribe to my YouTube. It's Ageless Blueprint 1. I have a lot of things that talk about stress and how it affects hormonal balance. It affects it almost completely. We wrote 2 books. One is Are Your Hormones Making You Sick? The other one is called The Stress Connection. And stress is connected to everything. So when you're stressed, you don't ovulate. When you don't ovulate, you don't make progesterone. So that's how it affects it. When you don't make progesterone, you're going to feel out of balance. Okay. You may have irregular bleeding. You may have fibroids. You may have, all the things that I've been talking about with hormone imbalance. So yeah, stress is the number one thing you want to try and handle, and it can definitely affect your reproductive cycle. All right. So what's the next question? My doctor says I'm too young for menopause. Why am I having these symptoms? Again, that is one of those simplistic statements because we're not using the right test. And believe me, saliva test is how we end this confusion. I've been doing it for 25 years. If we get enough good information, we can make good decisions. But there's so much confusion. This is my motto, it's a wrong test and the wrong hormones. We don't understand, we do understand, we just don't implement it. Fat soluble hormones, you can't look for them in the blood. I'm not telling you saliva is perfect, but it's much better than blood. And it can tell you, you may not be in menopause. You just may not be having periods because of stress. And one test you should do is called the FSH, and that will tell you whether or not you're in menopause or not. All right, so let's go to the next question. How to know if my wife's symptoms are stress, aging, or hormone related? Okay. Hey, look, three things. Okay. You need to do the testing. Okay. If you do the testing, you understand what I'm talking about, please get your wife, and you need to even come to the course. I actually just created a document called A Man's Guide to Women's Hormones. And so that's also a part of the course. So where he understands and she understands what's going on, and that will settle a lot of conflict that happens based on hormones. Because you see, this guy is asking, how do I know if my wife's symptoms are due to this or the other? Well, a lot of men are asking that. That's what I asked 25 years ago. How do I know if these symptoms have something to do with what I'm doing or not doing, trying to help my wife being an OBGYN? So men are very concerned. I'll hear from patient spouses, thank you for giving me my wife back. And that's why I said, why don't I feel like myself again? And then I'm going to have the second part of the course is, how do I feel like myself again? So we're going to talk about all of the things we can do so that you can understand what's going on. You can anticipate what needs to be done, and you don't have to rely on somebody on Facebook or some doctor who may not be as informed as you are right now. All right. So that's the goal. All right. We have some more questions.
Yes. Okay. Next question. Why do women think there has to be things that change?
Why do women think? Well, because things do change. I talk about cycles, balance, and transitions. Okay. Your cycle will change. At first, you have no cycles. Then you go through puberty. You have cycles. You start to get into the cycle. That's a transition. Whenever there's a transition, there can be some rough sailing. So you get these irregular imbalances in your hormones. So then you go into your reproductive age. And because you're having so many cycles, you have to make sure that there's balance in each one of those cycles. Okay. So that's, so you have to, that's a big percentage. You got to make sure all those, when you don't have as many cycles, it's not as big of a deal. And then menopause is that there is a change. You're going to the non-reproductive stage. Those transitions can be bumpy, but if we test right, we can smooth out those bumps through perimenopause and puberty and menopause. So if you have the information and you see where the imbalance is in those transitions, those changes or transitions don't have to be as turbulent. They don't have to affect you as much and affect your relationships, especially your most important relationships. All right, next question.
Do all women go through the so-called change?
All women will stop ovulating, okay, if you live long enough, okay? All women, if you live long enough, ovulation will stop. And ovulation means making an egg, so getting pregnant. But that doesn't mean menstrual cycles stop when ovulation stops. That's what happens with perimenopause. You may not ovulate, and so now you have a period, okay? But that doesn't mean that just because you have a period doesn't mean that you're fertile or that you ovulated. All right. So all women will stop ovulating. And this is what a message I'm trying to get across. Estrogen is made by the fat tissue, even during menopause, but you can't see it in the blood. You can see it in the saliva. All right. So estrogen can still be made. Progesterone is only made when you ovulate. So if 100% of women will stop ovulating, that means 100% of women will stop making significant amounts of progesterone, and they don't have a backup system like estrogen does. So all women will stop ovulating. And I can say all women will stop making a significant amount of progesterone, but I can't say that about estrogen. And that's what you need to understand. Just because you're going through you've gone through menopause and stopped having a cycle does not mean you don't have any estrogen on board. All right. So next question.
We have some from the it looks like YouTube. Do these tests require special preparation?
Hey, if you get the test, the saliva test, look, I would love to show you. And if you take the course, I'll show it. You'll be able to interpret it. I will actually give you an interpretation. And it's not a diagnosis or anything. I'll just tell you what it shows. Cortisol's low. That means that. Progesterone's low. That means that. We can talk about different ways you can try and correct it. But yes, they do need some interpretation. But I'm going to tell you, the interpretation is not that hard. Okay. There's a ratio between estrogen and progesterone. If it's out, if it's out of range, you can put it back. So believe me, it's not as difficult as guessing or doing trial and error. It's something that anybody can understand. I've been explaining it to patients for 25 years, and patients go away and they can understand it. So, all right, next question.
How do men fare during a woman's change?
Well, that's the key. That's why I said you have to have a man's guide to hormones in women, because believe me, she's at a sensitive stage, and what you can say and what you shouldn't say is very important. Okay. So you want to understand, you don't want to say certain things. Oh, why are you acting so crazy? Oh, no, you need to understand it. You need to help support her. So that's why I have included this man's guide to hormone replacement, because not to hormone replacement, a man's guide to women's hormones. So they understand these cycles and changes, because they need to understand it in their children, in their daughters, is understand what's going on with them. So it's very important, I think, for men to understand this also. And I would love it for the woman to give the man that handout. And it's very extensive. And again, I want people to have the information.
So this is a good thing for single dads to know. They can help their daughters through things that they have really no clue on how to do this.
Exactly. Or just get them to take the course. I always said that this should be taught in 5th grade health class. We talk about the hygiene, but we really need to talk about what it means, what it's going to mean in the future. Is that to understand, if you decide to not have children, you need to know that, hey, look, I need to pay special attention to make sure I'm not making too much estrogen and not enough progesterone. I will tell you, the incidence of infertility and endometriosis and hormone problems are very consistent with high-performing women, women who haven't had any children, or women who are under a lot of stress. They're also going to have issues. So, all right, I see we got another question from YouTube. Is that right? Oh.
Yes, we do. Here we go.
Okay, my insulin levels are high, and I've heard that hormone therapy may help in some cases. Can you explain how hormone therapy could help improve my insulin resistance? Okay, so you may have PCOS, and that causes insulin resistance. Okay, so yes, stress, cortisol can cause insulin resistance. So I would look at your cortisol. Also, estrogen stores fat. Okay, that fat tissue is inflammatory. It can cause insulin resistance. So yes, people with PCOS, and PCOS is really a progesterone deficiency, they're the ones who can have insulin resistance. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to make sure your cortisol, estrogen, and progesterone are correct, or where they should be, and that's going to decrease the likelihood of you having the insulin resistance, because it's going to help you to lose weight. It's going to help you to do all kinds of things, and that's going to help with that particular issue. All right. So I know, so you have some more questions from last week, because we got about 4 or 5 more minutes.
Okay, let's try to group these together.
Okay.
Why such a change for women? What is the change about?
Okay. Again, I know because that's what people said. That's the story that's being passed down. It's the change. It's the change. Yeah, it's a transition. So we can call it a change again. You're changing from being reproductive to being non-reproductive. That's the change. So what happens? Your hormones change. Okay, you stopped ovulating. That's the change. Stopped ovulating. Puberty, you started ovulating. You started ovulating. You started making progesterone. Okay, then you went through menopause, you stopped ovulating. Those are the changes. Ovulation, no ovulation. That is the change. And it's no progesterone. Now I'm making progesterone. Yes. I always look forward to your sessions every Wednesday. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you, Zavia. I'm glad. Tell somebody else. Okay. Uh, Take the course. I will get on the waiting list. Let's go back to the QR code. Okay. This is the QR code if you want to be on the waiting list for the course. And I would love for you to join my school. That's where we're going to have it. I'm also going to offer it, even if you're not a part of the school, is that because women need to know this. And I'm trying to do it in an organized fashion. So that is if you want to course. Guys, do this. Take the course. I'll send you the man's guide to women's hormones. And this is I get invitations to speak to groups, and even if you have a group of 10 or 15 women, almost like a Botox party, we can have a hormone party. And either I will do it by Zoom, or I'm trying to recruit coaches who can do these courses. And a lot of these coaches already will have some kind of stress management. I'm speaking with somebody this afternoon who has a group of women, and I want to talk to her about, hey, look, I want to educate you so you can educate your women. All right. So that's my goal. I'm really trying to spread this message. It's been too long. It's been 10,000 years that we've been dealing with it. It's too long. And I think we can end this hormone confusion if we just take time to understand it. All right. So I don't want to get always on my soapbox, but Zavia, thank you. It's always, I do these and I say I'm going to keep doing them because I'm dedicated to it. But it's always good if you'll comment, say, keep up the good work, or you can tell me, hey, Dr. Taylor, you're full of it. This is why. So let's talk about this. Get in the comments, ask questions, whatever. All right. Anything? So what else we got? We got 2-3 more minutes.
Let's see. What can help get to the root cause of things?
Proper testing, proper information, proper questions, proper answers. That's what we're talking about, is that, yes, to get to the root cause, you don't want to go symptom by symptom. You understand the process. That's the key. Understand the process and not just, oh, I can't sleep. Where's my sleeping pill? Oh, I can't wake up. Where's my Adderall? Okay, I don't have any energy. Where's my testosterone? Why is the testosterone causing me to have chin hair? Okay, some lady was talking about how much acne she had on the testosterone. And this is one last thing. Okay. I saw this on Facebook this morning. Okay. I signed up for some of these Facebook groups, so I want to hear what you're talking about. So this woman was saying she was shocked that she had an estrogen positive and progesterone positive cancer because she had been on hormone replacement therapy and she felt great the whole time. It was the best thing that ever happened to her, and she couldn't understand why she had a estrogen positive cancer. Well, the reason why is that you didn't have the information. You may have felt great, but you didn't know it was overstimulating a breast mass. Okay. And so I'm not telling you that was the cause, but if you had known what your hormones were, you would have said, oh, look, I need to correct this. Now, again, maybe it didn't have any cause at all, but you can't take this hormone therapy without good testing because you don't know what's happening underneath. Just because something makes you feel good does not mean it's the right thing for you. Alcohol, drugs, all these things, they make you feel good, but it's not necessarily, it's also doing some things underneath that you don't see until they become a problem. All right. I think we have one more question. Your social media team is doing an amazing job conveying your message. Thank you for all the hard work and dedication. All right, thank you. I hope you join my school. I want you to comment in my school. Hey, I had kind of taken a little vacation I didn't do any podcasts for the month of June, all this, but I'm back and ready. I'm ready to get information out there. I got a new energy. I got a new background. I'm going to take away all the fake stuff. I'm going to talk to you one-on-one and get my message across. All right. Hey, Rebel, you got any parting shots? And next week, I'm trying to see, I want to get a couple of patients on. One has been with me for 20 years, and she's like, I hear all these other women talking about all these problems, and I've been doing saliva tests and all this, and I don't understand what's going on with them. And then I have another patient who is new to this. I want to try and compare and contrast those people. Any last words before we go?
I wish I did, but we are out of time.
Okay. All right. I'll see you guys next week. All right. And Xavier, thank you. Hey, tell somebody else about my podcast. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, my podcast. So, all right. Thank you guys. See you next Wednesday.
Thanks for joining Dr. Taylor today. If you missed any part of this show, just check out the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Ageless Blueprint is every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time on W4HC Radio at W4HC.com. Together, we discover the ancient secrets to better health through science and spirituality made for modern times. Until then, feel free to check out agelessblueprintpodcast.com and TaylorMDFormulations.com for more information.